When I bought my Montblanc Nicolas Roussec in January of 2024, I was very concerned that perhaps I was making a bad decision. I knew that I liked the look of this watch, but I was going to be spending a lot of money on a neo-vintage second-hand watch from a company that is not primarily a watch company, and a design of watch and a size of watch that I wasn't really sure that I'd actually then wear, but I just thought that perhaps looked really cool. But as it's turned out, since purchasing this watch, since owning this watch, that it is the best single purchasing decision I think I may have ever made. Hello, you're watching James. My name's James, you're watching me, and I am talking about watches, and I'm finally going to be talking about my Montblanc Nicolas Roussec, and I'm going to be talking about a couple of things in this video, a bit beyond what I normally do in my reviews of videos. Firstly, just a tiny little bit of history about Montblanc and this specific model, just to give you a little bit of context. I will rush through that, don't worry too much. I'll then spend most of my time talking about this specific watch and giving you some details, probably again a bit beyond my normal reviews. And I want to do that because I really love this watch, but also because if you are thinking about buying one of these yourself, then you'll probably find online that the information is a bit spread out, the videos are a little bit spread out, and it's a little bit hard to get all that information in one spot. And I hope that this video can now be this video that you need for you. But I also just want to show off this watch for those that just think it's an interesting design. But I do hope that you stick around to the end of this video, because I'm just going to give you some more advice about this watch specifically, but it is also advice that I think you can utilize on any sort of used luxury watch purchase, and a little bit of a story that's attached to this. But what I can say before I even talk about anything else is that this is the best purchasing watch decision I've made, and it's my best purchasing watch decision I've made because it has turned out to be my favorite watch. It has turned out to be my most worn watch. It has turned out to be my grail watch, a grail watch which I didn't know was a grail when I bought it, but now I assign that term to it because that's how I feel about this watch. But we should know that Montblanc isn't primarily a watch company, or at least it wasn't prior to them starting a watch company, because they started in 1906. Obviously, they are concentrating a lot on fountain pens and leather goods and bits and pieces. But in 1997, they decided that they wanted to start creating their own watches. And unlike a lot of other brands, rather than outsource these watches or just brand their name on something else, they founded a proper watch company. They bought a factory, they filled it with lots of machinery to custom make Swiss watches, and the parent company bought Minerva Movements, which is a historic heritage movement brand, and incorporated it into Montblanc. So I can tell you there is a few different variations of watches that they do produce both in the past and today, but I can say all of them are proper luxury Swiss watches. They are not a fashion brand, they are not a branded on top of something else that they've had made for them. It is a watch brand. But of course, I'm talking specifically about the Nicolas Roussec, a watch that was first released in 2008. And why do they call it the Nicolas Roussec? Well, he apparently was the person who first was accredited for creating the chronograph movement. It wasn't in a watch, it was in this interesting sort of box that he did for timing things, and he was timing things using this twin disc design, a twin disc design that was then using a pen to make markings. So they have attached this idea of a chronograph to the original designer, but also a pen, which obviously works in with their company. But you'll then notice this twin disc design that is on the watch that I'm showing you today, and it's on all the models of these watches throughout the years, because the design that I own is the first of the Nicolas Roussecs. When they first brought it out, they brought it out in a very high-end kind of price in different sort of precious metals, but then they've started to release it in other variations. Mine is the stainless steel, more affordable version. They've then done multiple variations of the movement as well as the design of the dial, and they've also still then created today. And thankfully, the one that I am showing you today is my favorite of all the Nicolas Roussecs, and it is, well, I'm not going to say it's affordable, but it's achievably priced. However, if you do go looking for one of these, you'll see the prices do vary considerably, from 4,000 Australian dollars up to like 14,000 Australian dollars. But I'm going to talk more about that at the end of the video. Let's just dive into this specific watch at the moment. And let's start with the size of this watch, because it is a larger watch, but keep in mind the design, for me, in my mind, forgives the size a little bit. The case is 43 millimeters. It's 15.3 millimeters tall. The lug to lug is 50.4, but with the bracelet, it does have male end links, so it sticks out to 53 millimeters. The lug width is 22 millimeters, but it then does taper down, or at least the bracelet does, to 20 millimeters. Size to me, it's 181 grams. Now, I normally stop with my dimensions at that point in any review that I do, but because of this watch being something a little bit extra special to me, and because if you are watching this one thinking about purchasing one for yourself, that you may then want some more extra information, I'm going to give you a couple of more measurements of this one. Because the crystal itself, or the dial, well, that's actually 35 millimeters. The crown diameter is 6.9 millimeters. The mid case, not including the crystal or the bezel or the case back, is 6.8 millimeters. And the actual height of the bracelet links themselves is 3.3 millimeters. And I know all those dimensions do make it sound like a large, chunky watch, and there is some heft to it. However, I always think design forgives size to a point. And this one, absolutely. If I made this smaller, it would look a little bit weird. For me, on my 17 centimeter wrist, it's great. As I've already mentioned, this is my most worn watch in the past year, and that is because I absolutely love the look of it and the feel of it and the design of it, but also I love how it looks on wrist too. And the Nicolas Rousseks are powered by a Minerva movement. There's a couple of variations depending on the model, but the majority of them, and probably the ones that you're going to be looking at, are this automatic high beat 28,800 vibration movement, the MBR200. It has a twin barrel with 72 hours of power reserve. It does have hand winding, and it is a single pusher chronograph, which means one push to start the chronograph, one push to stop the chronograph, and one push to reset the chronograph, all through that one pusher. But there's a lot more going on with the complications of this watch beyond just being a chronograph, because it also has a date calendar, it has a day and night indicator, and it has true GMT functionality. And you'll probably notice that that GMT hand and the hour hand are reminiscent of a fountain pen. Well, that is a bit of a nod to the company's heritage. This particular model of Nicolas Roussek is the 7138, and it comes in two variations of like a silver dial and a slightly darker dial. This is the slightly darker dial, so it has a bit of a combination between grey and silver. That grey being at the centre of the dial with printing on it in white, Mont Blanc and automatic, and that grey is then replicated on the edges there, as you can see, but they have also had printing saying chronograph and Nicolas Roussek. There's quite a few different finishes and colours on this dial of this watch beyond just that grey. You'll see the silver outline behind the main numbers is a sort of radially brushed sort of silver. There's a section above that in almost like a big arc that has a much more polished aspect to it. The numbers and the markings on that sort of arc are in black. At the base of the watch, you'll see that Geneva sort of striping that creates that lovely light play. That bridge that covers those two discs are all polished. That's reflected with the little covers as well of those discs. Also, the hands are all polished, except for, of course, the GMT hand, which is heat-treated blue. But you'll also see that heat-treated blue is then also reflected on the chronograph hands and some of those screws. Those chronograph hands don't move because the discs themselves move. Discs that have another sort of silver pattern on them that radiates out from the center but has some black printing on it too. You'll see when you activate the chronograph, that disc on the left starts counting the seconds, and you'll also probably notice that that is the only movement that you are initially seeing on this watch because there isn't technically a second hand. Thankfully, this movement is perfectly fine to allow that chronograph movement to be run continuously. So you can leave that moving and it doesn't affect or damage the movement. And it's then nice just to have that little bit of movement. And you'll see a little bit extra movement on that right-hand disc because that is your minute counter. The date window is a white background with black printing, which is then sort of reflected on the other side with the day-night indicator being white during the day and blue during the night. There is a tiny little bit of lume on both the hour and the minute hand of this watch, which does glow at night that you can see. It's not particularly usable to read the time after dark, however, and I don't specifically think that was the idea behind the lume. I don't think they put lume on the two little hands and then expect people to be able to read the time. What I do think is that having that little bit of lume on those hands makes those hands stand out more against that background, allowing it a little bit easier to read during the day. It's a very easy, legible watch during the day, but realistically that lume I think is there for daylight, not specifically for after dark. You can see I can activate that chronograph with that mono pusher on that bottom left of the dial. Start, stop, reset. And all those amazing features that are on this dial is covered by a mildly double-domed sapphire crystal. The bezel and the case and that pusher are all polished, but you'll see there is a big step down sort of feature on the lugs, which helps break up that polish a little bit and gives you a further design element of this watch. The crown is unguarded and not screwed down. This watch only has 30 meters of water resistance, so that is worth keeping in mind. And what is also worth keeping in mind is that the hand winding action of this watch, it's okay, but it's a little bit gritty and it certainly doesn't feel like a high-end luxury feeling hand winding experience, but that's just part of this movement. What it does have though is a nice black and white Montblanc enamel logo on the very end of that crown. We've already had a look at that beautiful movement, but let's have another look, but also concentrate a little bit more on the case back itself. It is a sapphire see-through case back. It is a screw-on case back, and there's a little bit of text that is written on there. It says it is Swiss made. It identifies that it is the model 7138. Tells you that it has 30 meters of water resistance. It also has PIX with a little register sort of logo there. I think that relates to Montblanc itself. It's another one of their sort of logos, and it is PB280716. And I don't really know what that exactly relates to, but that's also on that case back. Now, when I bought this particular watch, I bought it on a leather strap. It wasn't the original leather strap. There's a couple of reasons for that, but it also came with the deployant clasp, which you can see here, which is quite nice, perfectly fine. But I really wanted the bracelet for this one, and I bought this one from Montblanc. It is the original bracelet, and it's all solid end links, solid links, but it is push pin links. They are individual links, however, which is nice. It has a bit of a mixture between brushing and polishing. It's a butterfly clasp, but well, there's a bit more to talk about with this bracelet, but it is worth noting that the spring bars that are within this are very thin spring bars, and it then allows for some movement of those end links. This is the correct bracelet for this watch, and there is some movement in those end links. It does not have a nice, perfect fit, which is what I would have loved, but it doesn't. I'm not sure if this is consistent with other watches that you can buy with the bracelet, but that's how this one represents. So this is what I wanted to show you. And as I show you some more footage of this particular watch, trying to show you as much detail as I can, I want to give you some advice and a little bit of a story about this watch. The first piece of advice relates, well, to any luxury watch purchase that you're buying secondhand, especially if it's a bit of a neo-vintage style watch and if it's a non-popular watch. This Nicolas Roussec, as much as I absolutely adore it, it is certainly not a popular watch. And I know it's not a popular watch because I've paid attention to them over the years. I've paid attention to them prior to purchasing mine, and I can see that they don't really sell quickly. And if you're buying one of these or another watch that perhaps maybe fit this same sort of idea of a non-popular watch, be mindful that you may end up being stuck with it. I love that I'm stuck with this one. It's never going anywhere, but it is worth keeping in mind that if you do buy one, selling it would be very difficult. So make sure you make the correct decision for yourself. And one way of doing that, and something that I do, is I go onto something like Chrono24 or eBay, and I start following the watches that are for sale at the moment. I put them to my favorites list, and then if they do get sold, they then fall off that wish list, or they get shown as they have been sold. I've done this recently with another luxury watch, a watch that I thought was the same as this one that I might get stuck with if I bought, but as I've seen with that one, it sells all the time. But whereas these Montblancs, 18 months ago when I was looking at them, some of those ones are actually still for sale. But when I purchased this one, I noticed a few specific things, and I took my time when I made this purchase. I really researched it, I really looked into it, I really thought about it. Oh, hello, sorry to interrupt. I hope you're enjoying the video so far, and if you are enjoying the video, I'd just like to invite you to subscribe to the channel. You just have to click on that little subscribe button. It doesn't cost you anything, but it does make a big difference to me and this channel, and really gives me that motivation to continue making content. But let's get back to this video. But if you look at the watches that are for sale and the ones that I did at the time, they range a lot in price, from around 4,500 Australian dollars all the way up to maybe 13,000 Australian dollars. And when I was looking into this watch, I wanted to make the correct buying decision, so I took a lot of effort and a lot of time, and I even spoke to every single seller of these watches worldwide. And what I found out when I did that, and what I learned about this watch when I did that at the prices and the watches, is a few things. Firstly, those prices related somewhat to do with the condition of the watch, whether it had been well worn or whether it was almost like brand new. Secondly, it had to do with whether it came on the bracelet or off the bracelet, and also whether it came with packaging or not. But something that I did find, because I spoke to so many, is if you decide to buy this watch on the bracelet, be mindful that most of them don't have spare links with them. For some reason, whoever's bought these watches in the past tends to throw out the spare links. So be very mindful if you choose to buy one on a bracelet that it may not have spare links. And I can almost guarantee you, no matter which one you may choose for yourself, whether you spend the cheaper amount or the more expensive amount, is that they would never have been serviced. Because that's what I found. I asked everybody about service history, and every single seller, no matter how much they had priced their watch for, said that the watch had never been serviced. And that's why when I was considering buying one of these watches, I then went to Montblanc and I asked them about servicing costs. I also asked them about, are the bracelets available? Because my thought was, well, if I'm going to spend some money, maybe I should take a little bit of a gamble, buy the cheaper version, then buy the original bracelet, and I've got a brand new bracelet with all the spare links. I can find a box. The box that I showed you earlier is one that I found on eBay, and then I can get the watch fully serviced, so that it would be in as good condition as possible from the day that I bought it. Because if I spend a lot of money or a small amount of money, I'm still going to have to get it serviced. But I took that gamble and I ended up buying the single cheapest version of it that I could find worldwide. I bought it through Chrono24, and I even bargained it down a little bit in the price. But when it arrived, I noticed that there were some scratches on that sapphire crystal, and that was really disappointing. Thankfully, however, though, if you buy it through Chrono24, there is a little bit of security with the money. You don't then release the funds to the seller until you then sort it out. And so I spoke to the owner and we actually negotiated a partial refund. It was again another gamble because I didn't know if I could get a crystal for it or how much that crystal would cost. But I took that bit of a discount. I ended up getting this watch down closer to $4,000, which is still a huge amount of money for me. And then I took it to Montblanc. I had the crystals changed out, I had the watch serviced, and I ordered the bracelet. The crystal actually ended up only costing 80 Australian dollars, which was significantly cheaper than I expected. The service of the watch was 800 Australian dollars, and ordering the bracelet was 900 Australian dollars. And that would have been perfectly fine if I had then received that bracelet and had no issues. However, unfortunately, I had some issues with the bracelet. So be mindful if you are going to buy one of these watches and you're going to order a bracelet for it. Firstly, that they may not have them or be on a back order, but then it also may not fit perfectly when it arrives. Because this is my story with the bracelet. I ordered it, I paid for it. It then took quite some time to arrive. I then had to follow up with Montblanc about it. When it then eventually did arrive, it had two different end links. One fit my watch perfectly, one did not fit at all. And then I almost had to have an argument with the watchmaker that they use as their agent within Australia to try and get it rectified. The staff at Montblanc themselves are brilliant and very supportive. However, they're not watch people, they're selling bags and they're selling pens, so they're very helpful, but it ended up taking a lot of time and energy and effort to get this resolved. It was almost a year later that I ended up having the bracelet actually properly put onto this watch. It didn't cost me any extra money. It was all covered by Montblanc themselves because it was an issue that was supplied by them through one of their parts, but it was a process. So I do have some very specific advice about this watch. If you're going to buy one, consider the fact that it is definitely likely to need to be serviced. Be mindful that you can order the bracelet separately, but it may or may not be available. I would definitely check prior to the purchase, and be mindful that there might be some other hurdles. What I can say now, after 18 months of ownership of this watch, all those hurdles were worthwhile. Having end links that don't fit perfectly, it's okay because I just love this watch. It is honestly my favorite and my most worn watch. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I hope if you are thinking about buying one of these watches that this has helped a little bit with the visuals, with the information that I've given you and a bit of the surrounding information as well. And if you're not interested in buying one of these watches, I just hope it was somewhat interesting and enjoyable. Thanks for watching. Here's a couple of other videos next.